This week gives us another great episode of Akebi Sailor Uniform, and this time the theme of the episode is perseverance and striving to get better at what you want to do. We start the episode with a bit of a follow-up or a wrap-up to last week's episode. Just like in their first meeting ever, Erika and Akebi are the first ones to show up in the classroom and start talking with one another. Akebi talks about how she told her dad and he wished he could have gone fishing with them. And I actually particularly liked how they handled the beginning of this scene because Erika refers to Akebi by her first name, Komichi, and there is a pause as Akebi makes her way over to her desk. I think this helps build the tension of the scene ever so slightly so that we can kind of feel the same nervousness and excitement that Akebi is definitely feeling in that moment. Of course, Akebi eventually responds, and they start using their first names as they gush about what they think is amazing about the other person. I thought the ending of the scene was pretty fitting as Akebi turns to greet the other students who show up for class, and Erika seems to be reflecting inwardly, as she ends up doing for most of the episode. I think that kind of moment perfectly encapsulates their different personalities. This episode ends up focusing mostly on the character of Hemimori. I don't think it would be an exaggeration to say that she is the main character of this episode. Right from the beginning, we establish that she is interested in music, and more specifically, she is interested in the guitar. The scene that kind of kicks off this whole episode is the one where she is sitting by herself and reading a music magazine, while listening to some of her favorite electric guitar. Akebi comes up to her and starts gushing about how it is amazing she can understand that magazine since it has sheet music in it, and she's unable to read sheet music. Akebi immediately jumps to the conclusion that Hemimori must be able to play an instrument. Hemimori tries to deny it, but eventually caves under the pressure of Akebi's expectant and sparkling eyes. She eventually says that she can only play the guitar, and Akebi enthusiastically says she would love to hear her play. They immediately cut to Hemimori's reaction face, and I definitely got a laugh out of this scene because it becomes immediately apparent that she may have just made a big mistake, but she's in too deep now to back out, and she has to go along with the flow. I really like how they give Hemimori some introspection here as she makes her way back to the dorm before most everyone else because she has not joined any clubs. She mentions how she brought her dad's old guitar with her for no particular reason, though it's obvious that she has an interest in learning how to play it. The way the translation was worded in the subtitles, it actually made it seem like she may have tried it out when she was at home. It said, "I haven't played it once since I moved here." So I thought that implied she may have been a little familiar with the guitar already and just wasn't confident enough to play it in front of others. I think this whole setup with Hemimori is pointing out something that many of us miss. Hemimori obviously has visions of grandeur and maybe even seeing herself as a rock star. I think we've all been there in some aspect. You have something that you really love and envision yourself doing it at the highest level, but as you actually try to do it, you realize that maybe you don't have the talent or you second guess yourself because you can only see the aspects you are doing wrong. Eventually, you convince yourself that it's not even worth the effort because no matter how hard you try, you will never get to the level you envisioned. This cycle repeats itself and just causes you to never actually start. And the key is that if you never even try to start from somewhere, there is no way you'll be able to achieve what you actually want. Sometimes it's just about overcoming the initial doubt you get from yourself and just to get started on the initial path. Hemimori has not even started learning guitar because of her own self-doubt and trying to skip steps. Even though she has a perfectly good guitar to start learning on, it's not right for her because she wants to learn to play an electric one. In addition, I think it's obvious that she doesn't have the confidence in herself to pick it up. That's showcased by the fact that she hasn't even learned basic chords, despite the fact that she's had access to everything she's needed to from the start. The key point here is that Hemimori has an obvious passion for guitar and a desire to learn, but the restrictions she put on herself is what's holding her back when it comes to pursuing what she wants. I did want to point out that I also enjoyed the little scene we got from Hemimori and her roommate Tagano. Essentially, Tagano comes into the room and Hemimori is pretending to jam out on the guitar by herself. It's one of those little embarrassing scenes we normally get from Akebi, but I like the way they did it here because honestly, who hasn't done something like that at least once? We cut over to Tagano at basketball practice, and she sees Akebi practicing vocal training out in the courtyard. After her practice, she has conversation with Akebi, and it's here where the second main theme of today's episode gets introduced. Akebi says the line, "It's fun when you slowly learn to do something that you couldn't do before, right?" This touches on the fact that to get good at anything, it's going to require time and effort no matter how talented or well you do at the start. It's very fitting that Akebi immediately asks if Tagano has heard Hemimori play guitar and how she's looking forward to hearing her play. We then cut to Hemimori getting flustered while learning the different guitar chords. When Tagano comes back, Hemimori is waiting to play a board game with her, which is obviously a way for her to procrastinate dealing with the trouble she was having learning the guitar. Well, that and she snapped a string while practicing. Hemimori voices her concerns about her self-doubt and lack of skill, and Tagano basically calls her out and says she shouldn't lead Akebi on if she doesn't plan to deliver. However, she follows that up by essentially relaying the same core message that she got from Akebi by saying no one can master something right away, that's why I practice every day. The next day, Hemimori is walking the school grounds and sees all of the classmates that are in clubs working hard. Some of them even look to be struggling, but they are still striving to get better. She even sees how hard Akebi is working and finally comes up with the determination to start fresh with a new set of strings and now a small goal to play a song for Akebi. Tagano then voices her own experience when learning to shoot a basketball, and it parrots the point I mentioned earlier. She practiced shooting shorter shots and moved back until she could eventually make the long shots that she could not at the beginning, and that there should be a method that Hemimori can try for guitar that should work like that as well. We get a really nice montage of Hemimori learning to play and practicing the song she wants to play. Eventually, we do get to the big moment where Hemimori brings her guitar into class and asks Akebi to make some time after school that day. We get to the two girls after school, and just before she starts actually playing the guitar, they hear someone else enter the room to put away the cleaning supplies. Akebi and Hemimori hide under the piano in the room to avoid being seen, though I'm not entirely sure why they need to hide. Well, I do know, it's so we can get the next scene from Erika. Erika is the person who came into the room, and as it's obvious that she thinks she is alone, she sits down at the piano and begins playing. This scene was probably my favorite of the show so far. It was easily the most artistic scene of the series, and they have a color palette shift and an art style shift. In the meanwhile, Erika is playing the piano in the background. I'll put up a few screenshots of this scene, but I don't think it will do it justice unless you watch the actual thing. This reminded me of a similar thing that was done in an anime from a recent season called Super Cub. Basically, the color palette would be very drab and gray until something would happen, and then magically the contrast would be turned way up and everything would become super vibrant. It feels like they did the opposite here, as everything fades away and you are mesmerized by the performance that Erika is putting on. Obviously, Akebi appreciates the performance completely, but things are difficult for Hemimori. She had barely mustered up the courage to actually play in front of Akebi, and now she has to follow and act like that? She tries to run away, but Akebi, being the genuine cinnamon bun that she is, forcefully holds her back and says she still wants to hear her play. After a bit of nervousness, we finally get her performance. Let me just say, I don't know how long she practiced for, but it didn't seem to me like it was more than a couple of weeks. If she was able to perform like that after a couple weeks, she really does not need to be worried or self-conscious about herself, because it was really good. I've tried to learn a bit of guitar in the past, and after a couple of weeks, I may have gotten a chord or two down, but I would never have been able to play even part of a song like that. Akebi gives her a standing ovation, as she rightfully should after that, and the episode ends with everyone motivated to do their best going forward. After last week's episode, I was worried how the show would follow up, but I think they were able to deliver another quality episode, particularly the scene with Erika playing the piano. If you have anything you want to add about this episode, let me know in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you would like to see more, and as always, have a fantastic day.